This is another project of mine. It's kind of an ongoing project. It's a 1966 Chevy short wheelbase pickup. This truck has been, my father bought this truck back in 1969, and it was a long bed, 3/4 ton. We put a cab over camper on the back of it, or he put a cab over camper on the back of it, and my mom, my dad, me, my brother, my sister, 2 dogs and a cat. Every year we would set out and we would travel the country on a vacation, you know, just seeing where it took us, you know, and I remember my mom would be planning for a month or 2 ahead, and she'd go down to AAA, and at the time you could go down to AAA and get maps, tell them where you were going to go, and they'd give you all the maps. And so she would get these maps and she'd open them up and we'd highlight everywhere that we were going to go. And Dad was an adventurer of types, and he would always want to veer off and go all these different places. And we learned a lot about the country. We learned a lot about ourselves, and our family even found a little bit of religion on the way on one trip. And that's worked well for my parents for many years. I've had this truck about 20 years. My dad had it sitting on the side of the house for years and years, and I wasn't in a position in my life where I could take the truck, and it just kind of sat there. And finally one day I got it, and it was about 20 years ago. I've always wanted this truck, and I've known from the time forever that someday this truck would be mine. Not because Dad said he was going to give it to me, just because I knew that it would be mine and I would have it at some point, you know. I've never known life without this truck. I'm 53 years old. I don't ever remember this truck not being around. It's always been sitting in one of the driveways that I've lived at. So, but anyways, what I did, I got it about 20 years ago, and I drove it for quite a few years, and then it ended up sitting for a while. I bought a newer truck, and this ended up sitting for a long time. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to really get into it and build it. And I had planned many plans of this truck over the years, that it was going to be, you know, it was going to, you know, as a little kid, it was going to be a 4-wheel drive, you know, monster truck. It was going to be a diesel with, you know, it was going to be 100% original. It was going to be this and that, and all these different things it was going to be. And my dog's letting herself out. It was all these things it was going to be. And it finally came down to, this is who I am, you know. So I took this truck and I took it down to the frame, and I cut it down and made a short bed out of it, and took the box and cut the sides down and made a short bed out of that as well. Actually, a friend of mine did the bed for me. The engine that's in here, originally it was a 292 with a granny low 4-speed, and that's what Dad always called it, the granny low 4-speed. And I put this 350 in it. This is a 4-bolt main 350 with flat top pistons, just stock cast pistons in it, Vortec heads, a 274 cam, and air gap intake, and a 650 double pumper. And I got a Muncie M20 transmission with it, and it gets along pretty good. Plan coming up on it is I'm going to put in the rear gears. I'm going to redo it. It has a 308 gear. I haven't done anything to the rear end, and I just did one on the El Camino, and I need to do one in here. I'm going to go with a 373 in it and be able to wake it up. It's a dog with a 308, but I mean, it'll go, but you got to have it wound up pretty good. But anyways, this truck, significance for me is you know, the sentimental value is just incredible with this truck. And I thought a couple of years ago, you know, my dad was never much for hot rods or cars or anything like that. Everything he had made sense, you know, and he had this truck, and he didn't have the passion for it that I did. And I started building it a couple of years ago, and he started asking about it, you know, and he started, you know, hey, how's the truck going? And he'd come over and look at it. You know, he lived right next door, and he'd come over and take a look at it and ask me about it, and I'd tell him about it, and it was kind of neat, and I thought, you know, I need to have this truck done while my dad's still around, so that way he could see that I did do something with it, and I didn't just have it sit and sit and sit, you know, because it sat for close to 10 years before I up till a couple of years ago. So I started working on it, and then my plan was, my dad and I, our plan was first drive. He claimed first ride in this truck. I'm gonna ride in that truck first, and we're gonna go up and see my friend, his friend that builds old cars, and we're gonna show him that truck that you built, and we're gonna look at his cars. And it was a plan, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Dad ended up passing away, and I let the truck sit for a year or so. I just couldn't work on it anymore. And then a really good friend of mine came up one weekend and said, "Hey, let's work on this," and we got it together. And so it's these little things in life that are so important to us, and family and friends, and this truck being one of those. This truck is a part of my family. My older brother, named it the Blue Goose on one of our vacations. My dad had a CB radio in the cab of the truck with a PA on it. And the three of us kids, we'd ride in the cab over camper in the back, and he put a speaker in the back. And he would flip that CB radio over to PA, and he would get on the mic, and he would tell us like a tour guide where we were going and what we were, he was just his way of teasing us a little bit. And my brother ended up naming this the Blue Goose, and I can't remember the name he had for my dad, but it was, just childhood memories and a lot of fun. So this truck, like I said, is an ongoing project. I've built this truck a million times in my head, from the time I was a little boy up until anytime I think about this truck, I think about what's the next step for it. What am I gonna do next? But it runs and it drives. And if you've watched any of my El Camino videos, you're gonna have seen this in the background. And this truck is incredibly important to me. My oldest son drove it around for a little bit, and I taught a couple of my kids how to shift gears in this truck, and it means a lot. So anyways, we're gonna look forward to this truck in a couple of the upcoming videos. I'm going to end up putting in, like I said, the rear end's I gotta do the gears in it. I'm gonna do a 373, and I'm probably just gonna do like a, not a spool, like a mini spool, put it in there, because this is just a 10-bolt truck rear end. I bought a 78 parts truck, and that's where I got this front suspension and the rear suspension, because it's front power disc brakes now with the 78 suspension. The rear end's the 78. It still has a trailing arm off of the 66. But I'm gonna build ultimately I'm gonna build a Ford 9-inch rear end for it. I have one sitting around behind the shop that's slated for this truck. But in the meantime, I'll probably just slap some 373s in a mini spool. That way I can at least have a little bit more fun with it. It's kind of hard to drive. First gear is so high geared that you really gotta slide the clutch to get it going, and then like stop and go traffic. I mean, it wants to roll at 20 miles an hour in first gear. So that'll all get taken care of. But I can go real quickly here. All right, so go ahead and flip the camera around, and we can see the engine in here. Like I said, it's got the Vortec heads on it, 350, 40 over. It's got flat top pistons. It's got the headers on it, and I did the power steering. The power brakes I pulled out of the parts truck, and it's all been replaced. That's all new stuff, but it gave me a starting point for some of the bracketry and stuff. I've tried to keep everything as functional as a 66 as possible. The heater works just like it did. I even have the original radiator. I had it cored a few years back, a little bit thicker, because like I said, this was originally a straight 6, 292, which I still have. And so I had the radiator, I had to have it redone, so I had it a little thicker core done to it. I got the rally wheels on it. I got 255/60s on the front and 275/60s on the back. Got a little ding in the door. That's going to have to get replaced. That's also on the list of things to do. I'm not a patina guy, so you may look at it and go, oh great, patina, but that's all going to go. That's not really my thing. I don't really follow trends too good. Now the interior's in really nice shape. Of course, I got the saddle blanket, seat cover, but this is all original in here. The radio works. This is pretty much how it was the entire time, ever since it was new. you know, that's pretty much it. I moved the fuel tank out of the back. I got El Camino parts in the back of it right now because it's a truck and it's sitting in my shop, so it's storage space. But anyways, I got the fuel tank I put into the back. I made a plywood bed for it. You know, you can't see it because I got a bunch of crap in there. But anyways, this is my one of my other projects. So anyways, thanks a lot for listening to me ramble on about something like this. And if you'd like, you can subscribe and give me a comment and ask me a question. I'll be more than happy to answer it. Thanks.